All right, our presentation is on MRI. MRI is popular because of its ability to produce high contrast resolution images without using ionizing radiation, unlike CT and X-ray. It uses magnetic fields, radio frequency pulses, and a computer system to generate images with soft tissue detail. To compare CT and MRI, CT shows more of a bony anatomy and exposure to radiation. It uses ionizing radiation and uses detectors to measure transmission of the X-ray beam. MRI, on the other hand, shows soft tissue anatomy. It's more costly. It uses antenna or receiver coils to produce a signal by moving hydrogen protons found in the patient. And by disease diagnosis, it is made by comparing the signal produced in normal tissue to abnormal tissue. It requires an understanding of SNR, which is signal to noise ratio, that affects contrast and spatial resolution. SNR and spatial resolution are inversely related. MRI is also much safer in terms of biological tissue damage rather than CT and X-ray that uses radiation. The two pictures here on the bottom, the MRI is on the left and the CT scan is on the right. Physical principles of MRI. Each examination is composed of numerous pulse sequences. Sequences in MRI vary not only by projection, but also by contrast weighting. Contrast weighting is defined by the difference in tissue brightness on the final image. During each sequence, the scanner deposits energy into the patient using radio frequency or RF pulses designed to excite hydrogen nuclei. RF pulses have long wavelengths, low frequencies, and may be found in the radio wave portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. When the hydrogen nuclei are excited, the scanner uses a radio frequency coil to measure the resulting signal produced by these excited nuclei. Electrical signal from the antenna is transmitted through an analog to digital converter, or an ADC, and then to a computer where the image is reconstructed mathematically using a process called Fourier transform, or FT. So the RF pulses have long wavelengths and low frequencies. In this next slide, it shows the electromagnetic spectrum. So these RF would be down here by the long radio waves. Interaction of nuclei with magnetic fields. MRI uses hydrogen protons to produce an image, just a single proton and no neutrons. Nuclei with even numbers of protons and neutrons remain balanced and unresponsive to magnetic fields, making it unsuitable for diagnostic imaging. Contrast has MR active nuclei that possess an odd number of protons and neutrons. An odd number causes the nucleus to be unbalanced, generating a net spin or spin angular momentum. An angular momentum allows technologists to manipulate nuclei and generate an image. The nuclei suitable for MRI are ones such as hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, potassium, fluorine, sodium, and phosphorus. Precession. MRI is possible because a magnetic nucleus precesses, which means it spins or wobbles about a strong, static, unchanging magnetic field, which is known as B0. This occurs whenever a spinning object is acted upon by an outside force. This example would be something such as a spinning top. The rate of precession of a proton in a magnetic field increases as strength of the magnetic field also increases. Hydrogen protons precess at a constant rate of 42.0 0.57 megahertz per Tesla. This is the gyromagnetic ratio. Most imaging facilities are equipped with a 1.5 Tesla superconducting magnet. Hydrogen protons placed within the magnetic field are precessing 63.86 megahertz. If the RF pulse emitted from the coil does not match precessional frequency of hydrogen protons in the body, then the energy will not be transferred to the proton. Therefore, no image signal will be generated. Net magnetization vector. Precessing hydrogen protons align either with or against the main magnetic field. Protons aligned with B0 or spin up are low energy protons because they require less energy to point in the same direction as the main static field. Protons aligned against B0 or spin down, face the opposite way of the main static field, are high energy protons, which are not used for imaging. Always more low energy protons than high energy protons. This measurable difference is net magnetization vector, or NMV. MRI increases in static field strength, replacing a 0.5 Tesla with a 1.5 Tesla magnet. As static field strengths increase, it is more difficult for protons to remain in high energy, resulting in a larger number of unstable, low-energy protons and greater NMV. A greater NMV is more protons are manipulated for imaging. A higher overall signal is then received by the RF coil, and this results in a better image. Resonance. To create an image, low-energy precessing protons in the NMV must be pushed away from alignment with B0. Protons aligned with B0 lie in the longitudinal plane, or the z-axis. RF pulse with matching precessional frequencies applied to these protons will shift away from the longitudinal plane and into the transverse plane. This transverse plane is also the XY axis. This occurs because RF pulse has deposited energy into low energy protons, causing them to become excited and go into higher energy states known as resonance. This will only occur in protons with matching precessional frequencies. Only hydrogen protons resonate because RF pulses are emitted from the RF coil at precessional frequency of hydrogen. Any other protons in the area, such as oxygen, carbon, or nitrogen, will not resonate because they have a different precessional frequency. Relaxation. Hydrogen protons are in alignment with B0 before receiving the RF excitation pulse. Precessing or spinning at the same frequency, randomly in different phases, or facing different directions. An RF pulse is applied to precessing nuclei for a quick moment. This excitation pulse accomplishes two things. One, it forces precessing protons in a transverse plane and away from B0, and two, it forces the protons to precess in phase, or face the same direction. As soon as RF pulse is turned off, nuclei begin to return to random configuration in a process called relaxation. MRI images are dependent on relaxation rate and appearance of the tissue. Relaxation rate relays information about the normal tissue and pathological processes within the tissues, because normal tissue and pathological processes relax at different rates. Relaxation are then divided into two categories, which are called T1 and T2. This shows the graph of the T1 and T2 relaxation. And here we're going to describe T1 and T2 relaxation. So the first one I'm going to describe is T1 relaxation, also known as recovery. It has other names such as longitudinal relaxation, spin lattice relaxation, or T1 recovery. Longitudinal relaxation time, an interval where 63% of longitudinal magnetization is recovered from the transverse plane. RF excitation pulse precessing protons are pushed away from the longitudinal plane and into the transverse. This creates a voltage and receiver coil, which makes a signal. MRI signal decreases then in strength. The other one is T2 relaxation, also known as dephasing. It has other names such as spin-spin relaxation or T2 decay. This transverse relaxation time, the interval is 37% of the original transverse magnetization is present. Once the RF pulse is removed, the protons will lose phase coherence, or the protons precess together, before the RF pulse is removed. Signal is then increased, resulting in higher signal and a better image. MRI signal decreases as more protons experience T2 decay and spin out of phase. This is called phase incoherence. So as these two pictures show on the bottom, T1 is a little more blurry than T2, and T2 shows a little bit more detail because it has a higher signal and better detail. Okay.
Spin density or proton density is important because an adequate number of protons is required to produce a signal. A stronger signal is received if the quantity of hydrogen nuclei that are present in certain tissues are increased. So an example would be ventilated airways and alveolar spaces within the lungs. They're very rarely imaged in MRI because of the sparse number of hydrogen protons found within air. So if these spaces are looked at in MRI, helium or xenon gas may be introduced to increase proton density. So this is just an image of the lungs if they were looked at in MRI. Next, I'm going to talk about the different magnets used in MRI. So the magnet provides the powerful static magnetic field. There are several types of MRI magnets available. They are measured in units of Tesla. Nikola Tesla defined a Tesla, or T, as a unit of magnetic flux density equal to 1 Weber per square meter. Field strengths most commonly used vary from 0.2 to 3 Tesla. So just for a little comparison, the Earth's magnetic field is approximately 0.00005 Tesla. Static field strengths surrounding the magnet, called fringe magnetic fields, are sometimes measured in Gauss or G. Carl Gauss defined a Gauss as a measurement of magnetic flux density in lines of flux per square centimeter. So for another comparison, 1 Tesla is equal to 10,000 Gauss. Permanent magnets are a type of magnet used in MRI. They are ferromagnetic. They have a field strength of up to 0.3 Tesla. Some advantages to permanent magnet types are the open bore designs that allow patients to move their arms around more freely, the reduction in high operating cost, and limited fringe fields. Some disadvantages to permanent magnet types are that they are heavy, low operational field strengths, inability to turn off power of magnetic field. So if the metal object accidentally becomes lodged in the bore of the magnet, they have to remove it against the full power of the magnetic field. The next type is resistive magnets. This is an electromagnet. They require larger amounts of electrical power, which makes it more costly. They produce a lot of heat, which must be dissipated with a cooling system. And resistive magnets have field strengths of up to 0.3 Tesla. Lastly, we have superconducting magnets. These are the most common type of magnets used in MRI. Electromagnets that use the property of superconductivity. Electrical cost is very low. Large electrical currents may be maintained with essentially no use of electricity, which is why the cost of this is less expensive than the other ones, because it doesn't run up the electricity bill like the other types of magnets do. Significant cost factor is providing low temperature cooling materials, so cryogens, which are liquid nitrogen and liquid helium. Superconducting magnets have a high magnetic field strength of up to 1.5 to 3 Tesla. The design of MRI. So there is a flared and short bore design. This is a superconducting magnet with flared and short bore, which is usually around 60 centimeters, and it's used to help relieve anxiety and possible claustrophobia. Open MRI system. There are now open MRI systems which are great for children and patients who are claustrophobic. So as you can see in this picture where the patient is going to lay, it's a lot more open than in the last picture. So rather than going into like a tiny circle, they have a lot more space to kind of look around just to ease any anxiety they have or claustrophobia. So they have a 0.23 Tesla resistive magnet type, open permanent type magnet, or open superconducting type magnet. The smaller open type units are slower, require longer examination times, and are restricted to basic MRI functions. Some contraindications to getting an MRI include pacemakers unless they are specifically certified as MRI safe, ferromagnetic aneurysm clips, metallic fragments in the eyes, cochlear implants, Starr Edwards pre-6000 model prosthetic heart valves, internal drug infusion pumps, internal pain pumps unless specifically certified as MRI safe, neurostimulators, bone growth stimulators, ferromagnetic GI surgical clips, and pregnancy in the first trimester. So basically all of these are metal. So the reason they don't want anyone with these things going into an MRI is because it's a magnet, so anything metal it's going to pull, and if these are attached to the patient, whenever it pulls, it can cause a lot of harm or damage to the patient. Next, I'm going to be talking about patient prep. So just make sure to gain the patient's trust and confidence. Describe the MRI, the importance of lying still. There's going to be a loud knocking sound while they're having their exam. The length of time sequence will last, which is usually about 15 to 90 minutes. The two-way communication system, lack of ionizing radiation, and the importance of removing all metal, so piercings, cell phones, watches, credit cards, etc. Relieving patient anxiety. So to some patients, the MRI aperture may seem kind of narrow and confining, which can cause a lot of anxiety and panic to patients who are claustrophobic. So some things you can do to relieve that would be play music, have patient close their eyes and think of other things, move the patient slowly, allow a family member to stay in the room. Since MRIs don't use ionizing radiation, it's completely safe for another person to be in the room with the patient as long as all metal is out of the patient and the person with them is just out of the room, and keep in constant communication. And in some cases, sedation may be required just to relieve that anxiety.
You hear it, Taylor?
When your doctor sends you to get an MRI, there's a chance you'll need to get an injection of contrast material.
If we're looking for or suspicious for infection, when we're looking for any type of cancer in any type of body part, giving the IV contrast is very helpful. We can make a much more accurate and quicker diagnosis.
If you need contrast, your technologist will put an IV in your arm before you go into the MR machine.
Hold very still.
Before we give the contrast, we take a series of pictures.
I'm about to give you the contrast.
And then we give the contrast and we see where the blood is flowing, because that's where the contrast goes into the vessels. And that makes usually cancer or sometimes an infection much more obvious and apparent.
When your radiologist compares the before and after pictures, anything abnormal really pops out because of the contrast.
This may feel a little bit cool in your arm.
Wondering what contrast feels like? Some people experience no sensation. Some people feel a generalized heating sensation going up their arm. Some people feel a cool sensation. And some people experience a metallic taste in their mouth.
CDI uses various MRI contrast agents, one of which is called gadolinium based, and it's a chemical compound that's medically safe and pure and made for this purpose. Can we go over?
Getting contrast takes a little longer.
Can I see those sequences?
Your total MRI may last 5 to 15 minutes more. Allergic reactions to contrast are rare.
All right, how we doing?
Although concern is always understandable and we need to be extremely cautious and careful in healthcare, we use them every day and they're critical to diagnosing your illnesses and making sure that you're healthy.
And that's the end of our presentation.